I'm Grant Walker and welcome to this update. And I'm joined by Simon Arcus, who's just started a role as Chief Executive of Business Central and the Wellington Chamber of Commerce. And when I say just started, I mean literally, this is day one. You're just out of quarantine and you had to work while in quarantine. Talk about being thrown in the deep end.
That's right, Grant. And I got to tell you, it's lovely meeting people and the team in person for the first time as well. And that's been one of the great treats of today. Still a bit bewildering on day one, but it's good.
So when you're in quarantine and you've got to meet the team for the first time, how difficult is that?
Look, I've had 14 months in Melbourne, and so I've got very used to Zoom. 14 months in lockdown. So I got very used to Zoom, got very used to dealing with people by Zoom or Skype. But the interesting thing is that, when you're meeting a new team for the first time, you want that human connection. You want to be able to read how people are responding to you, their body English, their reactions to you, and you don't get that. So it's sort of harder to assimilate into the culture. That's why it's such a delight to be in person finally in the office.
I almost feel like you're about to say it's a delight to be free.
Yeah, it is free. Yeah.
Can we have a little bit of your background? Now, I know that you know a lot of Wellingtonians, but for people watching this, can you briefly explain your background?
So I'm a born and bred Wellingtonian, and I love the city. Grew up here, have seen it through lots of its phases and really enjoyed growing up here. And I think, so in terms of my personal background, my heart is very much in Wellington, and coming back's a delight. Professionally, I've done a number of things. I suppose the term's eclectic, but I've had a background in insurance and financial services, and also worked in a lot of not-for-profit, particularly member associations, and particularly associations with a training or a commercial enterprise attached to them. Most recently, I was in Melbourne with Mercer Consulting, looking after 3 superannuation funds.
What attracted you to this job?
There's no question in my mind and for me that an organisation like a membership organisation, driven by purpose and staffed by people who are just totally committed to it, is the best place in the world to work. It has a service ethic, it has a philosophy, and it's just got great people involved.
It's a big area, Gisborne to Taranaki down to Nelson. Are you going to be travelling around? Are you going to be meeting people? What's your sort of first 100 days, if you like?
The priority is the members, and it's getting to know the members as well, getting to know their businesses and their challenges and their opportunities. And so I am going to be travelling a lot. I want to get out to the regions. I want to learn about how the shape of business in our region has changed over the years as well. There's some amazing things going on, from architecture to some artisan stuff to manufacturing, that we need to probably be showcasing even more, and that's what I'm really excited about.
Now, you've come back at a time in Wellington, which, you could call it interesting, couldn't you? Because you're going to have insurance and problems. You've got buildings that need to be strengthened. You've got businesses in COVID. You've got infrastructure problems like we've never experienced before, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. It's almost like the perfect storm. You've arrived back here, and do you sit there and go, or how do you decide where you're going to start? Because that infrastructure can sometimes cause all sorts of problems that spread out from there.
Look, my starting point for the role is one that I hope I can actually add some real value to Wellington with, which is, I think this is one of the most fantastic cities in the world. And I think Wellington is also one of the cities that's most down on itself in the world. The stories Wellington is telling itself are really negative stories, and I think sometimes we're not getting the full picture of just how great the city is. Every city's dealing with infrastructure issues, and we should be absolutely tasking anyone responsible, including governments, councils, to make sure that they deliver to us on the things that we need. But I think Wellington also needs to really be taking another look and saying, we're a great city. What are the things that can make us greater, rather than maybe being down in the mouth? And I'll give you an example, Grant. Do you know how many pipes burst in New York last year? 365 water mains pipes burst. New Yorkers are dissatisfied with that. There's ageing infrastructure around the world, but they're not packing up and leaving the city for dead. And my view is this is just such a great place. We should also be getting everything in context and seeing why it's such a great place to live in as well.
It's not such a great place to move in, though. Let's get Wellington moving. You've come into that as that's all about, they can't get the staff and it's about to be reviewed. Have you thought about that issue?
I'm concerned about it, and I'm concerned about it because, for a start, you don't pause or do a health check on a capital works program. It's just not something that makes a lot of sense because the thinking has to have gone into these things before you begin them. I think that Let's Get Wellington Moving is a sort of a heart in the right place initiative, but it's probably been captured a little bit by internal process issues, governance issues, and also I suspect a bit of sloganeering. I mean, in some ways, when I contrast it with the large capital works in Melbourne, where I've come from, they're just getting on with those. And you're not needing a sentiment of having to sell it to people. You have to deliver and to show that you've delivered, rather than maybe spending a lot of time trying to convince people that it's the right thing to do.
We talked to a lot of businesses about how they survived COVID. You had, in fact, longer lockdowns than we had in Melbourne, and you would have spoken to a lot of business people there. Do you think there's a difference between how we handled it and maybe those in Melbourne, or are there any learnings?
Well, it's a really interesting question, and I think it's one for the politicians to reflect on, the difference between Melbourne, or Victoria, and New South Wales. So Melbourne went into a very hard and very long lockdown, and that was partly because they had mismanaged the quarantine process. On the other hand, when New South Wales faced it, they had rolling lockdowns across the suburbs and a traffic light system to actually try to manage this in a different way. Victorians said it would never work. It did work, and I think the learning for me is there are different ways to manage these things, and obviously from our perspective, it's got to be the one that does the minimal harm to business. What we know from the stats is lockdowns are expensive, and lockdowns create uncertainty and business stress.
So what do you say to business owners then who are going from level to level to level? Their businesses are affected, then they're not, then they're trying to recover, and then you've still got rents to pay.
Look, my sympathy is with businesses, and I absolutely have enormous respect for the resilience that our businesses in New Zealand have shown. I think one of the practical things you can do as a business, and I'm sure businesses are doing this, is to really do a risk review, a risk analysis, if you like, of what has happened to them during that process. How did we cope? What went well? What didn't go so well? Where did we experience cost? Where would we have held off investing that we might into the future? What technologies helped us? And I think it's it's never an easy thing to be trying to manage, but I think the question there is like having a good look at the business and saying, how have we endured? What's made us resilient, and how can we build on that to be a better business into the future?
Is this job one where you hit the deck running, or is it one where you have to sit down and just take stock for a few weeks or a couple of months to actually get the lay of the land?
I think it's something of a mixture. You have a view, and it's informed by research. It's informed by looking and learning and listening to your team and your stakeholders. But over time, I think that second part, the listening and the learning part, is the valuable bit. So really understanding the challenges people are facing and how we can be part of solving them.
And you've got a business confidence survey out soon. You'd be eagerly awaiting that result.
Very much, and I think the other thing that we've put into that survey is trying to find out where businesses have held off investing, or where they're planning to, or where they may invest in the future if they have more confidence. And that data, I think, is going to be really interesting.
It's been a pleasure speaking to you. Welcome to freedom.
Thank you.
And welcome back home.
Thank you, Grant. Pleasure seeing you again.